Joining us now to talk about his blockbuster hit movie, Don't Look Up, and some of the interesting conversation around it is Daily Poster's own David Sirota. Great to see you, David.
Good to see you.
Okay, so first let's put the stats up on the screen. I think we have, this thing has been a monumental success. Here are the numbers. This is, the tweet says, "This is wild, climate metaphor movie, Don't Look Up, now at 152 million hours viewed on Netflix. This is nearly 40 million hours more than the next 9 most popular shows combined. This is one of their biggest releases in history." What do you make of the response, and why do you think it struck such a nerve?
Well, it's fantastic. Frankly, it's a much larger response than I ever thought, and I'm thrilled about that. I think that this movie speaks to a lot of different things that people can relate to. I think a lot of folks across the political spectrum feel like the media doesn't take serious issues seriously. I feel like a lot of people across the political spectrum feel like the government doesn't take serious issues seriously. And ultimately, this movie is really about that. I mean, there is a climate metaphor at play here, which is that we know climate change is happening. The government and the media doesn't take it seriously. But underneath that narrative is really whether we as a society are willing to stipulate basic facts and use those facts to constructively make policy and do things to address crises. And I think that's a kind of a universal message. The only people that message really, I think, probably bothers are people who are creating the problem. And I think there's been one analysis that I've seen of the movie that I think really gets it right, that our movie isn't really about the alleged ignorance of the vast mass public. Our movie is really about how elites and institutions essentially do not operate in the public interest.
Yeah, well, it's been interesting, too. The response has not been neatly divided along partisan lines. So we have a tear sheet, I think, from National Review, which is a conservative publication. This is New York Magazine. Liberal, Eric Levitz, who's sort of like left liberal, I think you'd describe him as. He says, Don't Look Up doesn't get the climate crisis. And basically his critique here, which I found a little strange, is that you're not literally talking about the climate crisis, so some of the dynamics are different. And it's like, well, yeah, it's an allegory, so okay, that's fine. So a liberal who panned it in certain regards. And then you had National Review, conservative publication, we have that tear sheet as well, and they published a review of it by Kevin D. Williamson that was very, very favorable. So why do you think it has scrambled some of the normal political circuitry?
Because I think that it's a message that maybe potentially polarizes people when it comes to who they see themselves through in this movie. I think that's really the key. When you watch this movie, the question becomes for the audience, who do you align with? Who are you watching this movie through? Which character are you watching this movie through? And I think lots of people go in and they see the movie through the eyes of the scientists. Some people maybe see the movie through the eyes of the media, which faces some criticism in this movie. And look, we knew that this movie was going to create a kind of emotional, polarized, intense response. And you know what? That's good. If this movie creates conversations around how we value science, around the climate crisis, around the pandemic and how we've dealt with that, that is the point of a film. That is the point of art, is to actually get people to start thinking. This movie is not about preaching about, here's a specific set of policies that need to be done. We respect the idea that the audience comes to this movie, and what we want to do is kind of promote and prompt thought, critical thinking.
Here's what I think is also really important, David, is when I was at MSNBC, I was routinely told climate doesn't rate. Meaning like, we can do the occasional climate change segment, but the audience, this is like feeding the audience vegetables. They really don't want to hear it. They're going to tune out. So better to cover, whatever nonsense is happening in the sort of political reality TV world. You just made a film that is an allegory for climate change that makes a lot of really salient, important points about how we've failed as a society to deal with that threat and any other number of significant threats facing us and facing the world. And it is one of the most popular things that Netflix has ever put out. Which I think proves the point that if you cover climate in the right way, actually people are extremely interested in what is going on in this front.
And I would argue that the vast viewership of the movie validates the idea that there is a pent-up demand for things that touch on the climate crisis. That we've actually created a discourse in the country where we've suppressed this fear and correct fear of climate change to the point that we don't talk about it because it's an uncomfortable, scary topic. And I think the reception to the movie shows that people actually do want to think about it, do want to talk about it. And my point when it comes to the media in particular is, yes, there is good climate reporting out there that pops up periodically, these big spreads, these big investigations. That's all really important. I think what this movie speaks to is that there's not necessarily that coverage baked into the day-to-day coverage. That we do have day-to-day coverage of the economy. We do have day-to-day coverage of foreign policy. But there is not nearly enough day-to-day coverage of the climate crisis. And by that I mean, when a politician says something about a bill, one of the top questions is always, well, how will that affect the economy? Another top question should be, well, how is that going to affect the livable ecosystem that supports all human life? And so the hope is that one of the takeaways of this movie is that if media folks are watching this is for them to ask, how can we put climate coverage and the coverage of science into our day-to-day coverage, as opposed to cordoning it off as a kind of special topic area? How do we build it into the day-to-day coverage?
I think that's very interesting to think about and really important as someone who, is here covering the news and I'm sure can do a better job in many of these respects myself. Something I'm definitely going to continue to think about.
You guys do a great job, but I will say this, I'm a journalist too. Making this movie has made me think about how I can do a better job. So the point is not to necessarily pick out individuals and say, oh, this or that set of organizations are doing good and these aren't. It's to say, hey, we should all be thinking about how we can all put this into the coverage that we do.
Yes, indeed. Congrats on its success. I'm happy for you personally as a friend, but I'm also happy because there are really important messages in this film. It's clearly struck a chord. It's clearly struck a nerve among some people who found it a little too, I guess, on the nose and too uncomfortable. But, this type of content that's consumed by a really broad-ranging audience, I think is so incredibly important. So thanks for pushing yourself out of your comfort zone and getting involved with this, because I think it's been really important.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. And thank you guys so much for watching. We're going to have more for you later. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.